Let me ask you something. Have you ever landed in a new city, felt completely fine for the first few hours, thought to yourself, okay, I got this, and then crashed so hard the next morning you couldn't remember what country you were in? Yeah, that's not weakness. That's your biology staging a full-on rebellion. And today we're going to talk about why that happens, what's actually going on inside your body, and more importantly, what you can do about it. Because whether you're dealing with jet lag, night shifts, or just that Sunday night dread when you stayed up too late and Monday is coming for you, there's a science to all of it. And once you understand the rules of the game, you can actually play it differently. So let's start with the foundation. Inside every single one of us, embedded in our DNA, there is a biological timer. Scientists call it the circadian rhythm. It runs on roughly a 24-hour cycle, and it controls a staggering number of things: your alertness, your body temperature, your metabolism, your mood, your immune system, all of it. Every cell in your body has this clock gene built right into it, and there's a master controller, a tiny cluster of neurons sitting just above the roof of your mouth called the suprachiasmatic nucleus. Think of it as your body's CEO of time. It takes signals from the outside world, mostly light, and then broadcasts that timing signal to every organ and tissue in your body using temperature as the messenger. Here's why this matters. You are fundamentally a daytime creature. No matter how much of a self-proclaimed night owl you think you are, your body was wired to be awake when the sun is up and asleep when it's dark. Research consistently shows that when people push too far against that rhythm, working nights, flying across time zones, scrolling their phones at 2 a.m., real, measurable harm starts to accumulate. We're talking about disruptions to cortisol patterns, dopamine function, insulin sensitivity, even immune response. A 20% reduction in insulin sensitivity has been observed after just 5 days of restricted sleep paired with circadian misalignment. That's not a minor footnote. That's your body actively working against you. Now here's the thing most people don't realize. You don't need a plane ticket to be jet-lagged. About 16 to 20% of the American workforce operates on non-standard shifts, but the rest of us are quietly jet-lagging ourselves every single week. You know that feeling Monday morning after a weekend where you slept in both days? That's called social jet lag. You essentially gave yourself a 2-hour time zone shift just by sleeping in on Saturday and Sunday. And your body is now flying from New York to Denver and back every single week without ever leaving your couch. No wonder Monday feels like a punch in the face. So what does a properly calibrated day actually look like? The core principle is almost laughably simple. Get a lot of light when you want to be awake, and minimize light when you want to be asleep. The tricky part is the timing and the amount. Your eyes contain special photoreceptors called melanopsin cells, and they work like a slow accumulator. They sum up photons over time and send that signal to your internal clock to say, hey, it's morning, wake up. To really lock in that morning signal, your brain needs to receive around 100,000 lux of light exposure before about 9 or 10 a.m. That sounds extreme, but step outside on a cloudy day, and you're already pulling in somewhere between 7,000 and 10,000 lux. Compare that to your indoor overhead lights, which max out around 4,000 to 5,000 lux, and suddenly you understand why sitting inside all morning isn't cutting it. 10 to 15 minutes outside shortly after waking can make a profound difference in how you feel throughout the entire rest of your day. And then there's the flip side. Once the evening rolls in, your brain becomes incredibly sensitive to light, almost paranoid about it. Where it took 100,000 lux to set your morning clock, it only takes somewhere in the range of 1,000 to 1,500 lux to shift your entire biological schedule in the wrong direction at night. So that bright overhead light in your kitchen at 11 p.m., that Netflix binge, that doom scrolling session, those aren't just habits. They are active commands you're sending your nervous system that are telling it, morning is happening right now, and your biology listens. Now let's talk about the thing that nobody outside of sleep science circles seems to know about. And I genuinely think this is one of the most underrated pieces of self-knowledge you can have. It's called your temperature minimum. Your body temperature isn't flat. It rises and falls throughout every 24-hour cycle. It hits its lowest point typically around 90 minutes to 2 hours before you naturally wake up. So if you usually get up at 7 a.m., your temperature minimum is probably somewhere around 4:30 to 5:30 in the morning. You don't need a thermometer for this. You just need to know your average wake-up time and do the simple math. Why does this matter? because your temperature minimum is your anchor point for shifting your biological clock. Here's how it works. If you're exposed to bright light in the 4 hours or so after your temperature minimum, your clock shifts forward, meaning you'll naturally want to wake up earlier in the coming days. If you're exposed to bright light in the 4 to 6 hours before your temperature minimum, your clock shifts backward. You'll want to stay up later and sleep in. This is the exact mechanism behind both jet lag recovery and the misery of going east versus west. And it's the mechanism most jet lag advice completely ignores. Think about it practically. Let's say you're flying from Los Angeles to London. That's a 9-hour difference going east. If you just land and try to catch the London sunrise hoping that'll fix you, there's a solid chance you're viewing that light at a time that corresponds to the 4 to 6 hour window before your home temperature minimum. Congratulations, you just told your body clock to shift in the exact wrong direction. This is why people who follow generic jet lag advice still feel terrible. They're applying the right tool at the wrong moment. What you actually want to do is start shifting 2 to 3 days before you even get on the plane. Wake up progressively earlier, get bright light exposure in those early morning hours, and maybe even squeeze in a workout. Each day you can shift your clock by as much as 1 to 3 hours using these levers: light, exercise, and meal timing in the right windows relative to your temperature minimum. And speaking of direction, going east is almost universally harder than going west. Your nervous system has a fundamental asymmetry. It's much easier to push through and stay awake a few extra hours than it is to force yourself to fall asleep earlier on command. When you fly west, say New York to Hawaii, you need to stay up later. Your autonomic nervous system has some biological flexibility for that. When you fly east, you're asking your body to fall asleep earlier, and that is a much harder sell for your brain to make. Research from 2006, published by Davidson and colleagues, even linked frequent eastward travel to measurable changes in lifespan markers, with eastward travel being notably more taxing on the body's long-term health than westward travel. Now let's talk about shift work, because roughly 27 million Americans operate on non-traditional schedules: nurses, firefighters, paramedics, pilots, truck drivers, overnight warehouse workers. These are essential people keeping society running, and the health data on what rotating shifts do to them is genuinely troubling. We're talking disrupted cortisol cycles, impaired dopamine function, increased risk of metabolic disease, and even reclassification of night shift work by the International Agency for Research on Cancer as a probable human carcinogen. That last one tends to make people go quiet. The single most important thing a shift worker can do, and I know this sounds frustratingly simple, is stay on the same schedule for at least 2 full weeks at a stretch, including weekends. The absolute worst version of shift work is the rotating swing shift, where someone works 4 days on one schedule and then flips to another. The body simply cannot adapt when the rules keep changing. If at all possible, negotiate with your employer for consistent scheduling. Even if the hours are unusual, consistency is what allows your circadian system to actually calibrate to them. The same light temperature exercise logic applies to shift workers, it's just flipped. You want bright light when you need to be alert during your working hours, and you want to minimize light exposure as you wind down toward your sleep window, regardless of whether that sleep happens at 3 p.m. or 3 a.m. What about sleep supplements? Melatonin comes up constantly. Here's what the science actually says, clearly and without the marketing spin. Melatonin is a hormone produced by your pineal gland, and it signals darkness, not directly sleep. It can help you fall asleep faster, but it does not help you stay asleep. And here's the detail that most melatonin labels conveniently leave off. Studies have shown that many commercial melatonin products contain anywhere from 85% to over 400% of the dose listed on the packaging. That's an unregulated hormone being consumed in unpredictable quantities. For adults trying to shift a clock for travel purposes, a low dose taken strategically can have a role, especially in elderly populations where natural melatonin patterns become disrupted. But for most people, particularly young adults and children, behavioral tools, light, exercise, meal timing, offer bigger effects with far fewer unknowns. 2 supplements worth knowing about from a behavioral sleep optimization standpoint are magnesium threonate, which appears to improve sleep depth and reduce the time it takes to fall asleep by engaging the brain's GABA calming pathways, and L-theanine at around 100 to 300 milligrams, which promotes a quieter mental state before bed. If you're a sleepwalker or someone prone to intense dreaming, be cautious with theanine. It can make dreams significantly more vivid. Always run new supplements by your doctor, especially if you have heart rhythm concerns, since magnesium does intersect with cardiac function. One more thing worth mentioning: a phenomenon called ICU psychosis. People in intensive care units, exposed to constant irregular lighting and disrupted sleep, can develop disorientation and even hallucinations. In controlled experiments, simply moving patients near a window with access to natural daylight reduced those symptoms dramatically. That is how powerful consistent light signals are to your mental state. Light isn't just about waking up, it is deeply wired into who you feel like throughout the day. Now, a quick word on short trips. If you're traveling for 48 hours or fewer, don't even try to adjust. Stay on your home schedule as much as humanly possible. Your clock won't fully shift in that window anyway, and the effort to force it will leave you worse off when you come back. Bring a portable bright light if you want control over your wake signal. Use an eye mask for darkness. Eat close to your home schedule. You can get through a 2-day trip feeling functional if you're strategic about it. Here's the bigger picture though. Your circadian system is not your enemy. It's not a rigid prison. It's a beautifully adaptive machine that responds to the inputs you give it. The problem is, most of us are giving it chaotic, contradictory inputs every single day: bright screens at midnight, random sleep times, no morning light, and then wondering why our energy and mood are all over the place. When you start treating your body clock with the same intentionality you give your calendar, something shifts. Focus sharpens, energy becomes more predictable. Sleep actually feels like recovery instead of just passing time. Here's your challenge for this week. Figure out your temperature minimum. Average your wake-up times from the last 5 days, subtract 90 minutes to 2 hours, and write that number down. Then pay attention to when you're getting light exposure relative to that anchor point. Just the awareness alone will start to change how you make decisions about light, sleep, and energy. Start small, but start. If this kind of deep dive into how your body actually works excites you, drop a comment below telling us the one area of your biology you most want to understand better. Sleep, energy, focus, hormones, whatever it is. The comment with the most interesting answer might just become our next video. And if you're not subscribed yet, what are you waiting for? This channel exists for exactly the kind of person who wants to understand the machine they're living in. Growth is not accidental, it's intentional. If you're ready to build a better version of yourself, welcome. Stay tuned.